It's time we get in the mind of artist M.C. Escher. Let's go down that rabbit hole of this amazing artist's work through a new documentary. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore, and I am pleased to talk to you today. You know I'm a huge fan of documentaries, but also I remember seeing the art of M.C. Escher when I was a very little kid. I remember thinking it was trippy. I'd never done drugs at that point, but I imagine that maybe is what the experience of doing drugs is like. And M.C. Escher has that unique ability to show you something, and then you look at it on first read, and then you see something more. It evolves, it transforms. It's also just incredibly skilled. And there's not, who can you compare to M.C. Escher and his amazing work? Well, there's an incredible documentary that is just been released. It's called M.C. Escher: Journey to Infinity. I have the director, Robin Lutz, and co-producer and art historian, Marijnke de Jong, joining us on the Film Threat Podcast. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Hello there.
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Robin, when did you discover the work of M.C. Escher? I was very young, and my father had some art book or what, I don't know where he had gotten it, but I just remember not only just looking at those images, but gazing at them, trying to process them in my head because they were not logical in the real world. Can I ask you both actually when you discovered M.C. Escher and how his work affected you?
Well, we have that in common, Chris. I was very young too, because my father was a graphic artist. So I was living in the same environment as the kids of M.C. Escher. And I saw books in my father's room about Escher. It didn't hit me right away because I was too young. But then when you grow older and you see those posters that were most of the time posters at school, and that was, I guess, also the same confrontation for Marijnke, I guess. That was at school, wasn't it?
No, it was earlier. I had a poster of Day and Night in my sleeping room when I was younger. And once I got a booklet. It was called Kaleidoscope. And you could take out and make those geometric figures of it with Escher's figures all around. And it was very nice to make them, but it was also very nice to have the book that flat, because then you could see how it was put together. So I know that I begged my parents to get two books. I want to work with and want to have in my bookshelf.
One of the things that really struck me about the documentary was the beginnings of the doc. When you really, and I'm amazed how much photography and what you're able to put together to tell the story of M.C. Escher's early life and what his influences were. Like, how did you approach that with, like, it must have been a laborious research to pull together all of the media assets to be able to tell the beginnings, because we don't even, in the documentary, and I think this was very smart on your behalf, we really don't see M.C. Escher's art as we know it until maybe midway in the doc. So you really get this sort of slow burn of his life and what his influences were. So how did you pull together all of that, the beginnings of the story?
Robin?
Yeah, well, the very beginning was selecting his letters, his diaries, the diaries of his father, reading and reading. It took us almost a year to make an ordering in all those text and letters and words and impressions. And then we came to the very famous sentence when he said, or when he wrote to an American collector, the only one who can make a good film about Escher, that will be me. And that was the moment we said to each other, Marijnke, okay, well, let's do that. But how do we do that? So at least Escher is talking to us by his own words. Every word in the movie are 100% his own words. But then you have, it's not radio, it's a movie. So you have to find images. And how do you tell the story by images? He has a very complex life because you can't. Because it's so complex. We have to tell the story from A to Z. You know, how do you say it in linear?
Yeah.
Linear.
Yeah. So our approach was a linear approach. You start in his very youth. Happily, he was also writing at early age already letters to his brothers and family. So we know a lot about him. One of the first scenes is the famous ballet scene with the little kids are dancing in an Escher environment, and that's make it also playful like Escher was thinking. That was our approach. How do we tell the film like it is an Escher drawing?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it,
And
Marijnke?
you show its DNA, how it's really still vivid in many artists and movie makers, but also in tattoo artists, makeup artists, in so many people. They're playing with his example themselves. So that's nice. I think that's also for, especially for a graphic artist, very uncommon that you are so well known. Sometimes even without that people know his name.
Well, I appreciate the approach that you took because it reminds me of another documentary by Brett Morgan called Montage of Heck about the life of Kurt Cobain, where effectively he used recordings, photography, and artwork that Kurt Cobain had drawn and his music to assemble that. And you used the same method. I just think that you had a more difficult task in the sense that, you know, you used what you had. You used what you had to tell his story. What also struck me is how much Escher's art has influenced, you know, not just people in the art world, but also filmmakers. You point out, you know, Inception by Christopher Nolan. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, I never saw the movie before. But the man who's making our animation, Robin Sipp, who made the animation in our movie, he was very he was admiring, and he still admires Nolan, and he talked about the movie, about the Escher influence and the staircase, and that's what really we needed, those examples. And happily, Escher is drawing this impossible staircase, but you can only see it from one point of view. But you can, in the movie, also only make it from a one point of view of the camera. So we could match those point of views from the drawing to the Nolan staircase, the Escher staircase Nolan was using in his movie Inception. And it's not only, we were walking in Italy, in Siena, and Marijnke said all of a sudden, she said, look at your right, and there was a guy making an enormous drawing on the floor, 3 by 3 meters, huge thing. And
in the street,
sorry?
In the street.
On the street, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he was drawing there for days and days. It took 3 days to finish it, and everybody was walking around. Even the police car was driving around it, and so you feel every day the influence he has on young people also, and you see it in the Escher Museum in The Hague. Lots of youngsters coming there, and they are amazed. If it's timeless, it's timeless work.
From a historical perspective, Marijnke, what where does MC Escher fall in terms of artists? You know, I feel, and you actually, you know, put this in the documentary that his artwork became, you know, part of pop culture in a sense. But where does Escher fit in art history?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because he's very difficult to fit in some direction. He was himself, he was very much convinced of the fact that art should be aesthetical and it should be craftsmanship. And that was why he felt at home with fellow graphic artists, because they also showed craftsmanship, and not every time it was aesthetical or not. But in fact, he was, as many others in his time, also a kind of a conceptual artist, because he also wanted to grab the idea of infinity, which is an abstract way of thinking. Concept. But the problem for him was that he just wanted to do that in a way that every ordinary people who didn't understand art could follow what he was doing. But you're asking a lot of people, but that was why he always used things that you can recognize, birds and fishes and things like that. But the way he put it together, he was a way ahead in sometimes. But I think it's very difficult to put him in some direction. Well, you'd say in the beginning of the movie, a pop art, I don't know even what it is. He was very isolated as well. Yeah.
He seemed to, and please correct me if I'm wrong in this interpretation, but he seemed to reject any trappings of fame. Celebrity just didn't interest him. In a way, it was almost intrusive to his purpose, which was to create more art. Is that a correct assumption on my behalf?
Yeah, it distracted him from making the next print he had in his head. Yeah, he always wanted to work, and when he had to reprint things, or when he had to meet people or to talk or to go to conferences, he was annoyed. The only thing he liked was to be at sea and to have nothing on his mind, and just to wonder about the world around him. That was something he took time for. But all the other things, don't you think, Robin?
Well, that's the main key. I think that's the main key in his life. That's wonder. Looking. His youngest son told us that he was walking all the time with a little magnifying glass in his pocket, and he was walking in the woods, and then he was all of a sudden on his knees, taking his magnifying glass and looking at little things, and that for a man for 50 or 60 years old, always wondering and wondering. That wondering is normal for little kids; they are always wondering. But when we get older and older, most of the people are losing this kind of observation of life, and he never lost it. That makes him so a special guy.
Now, having spent so much time in the world of MC Escher, what are your main takeaways? Having such deep insight, not just via the documentary that you made, but also the things that we didn't get to see in the documentary. You clearly had access to so much material. What are your impressions and takeaways?
Now, maybe we are going to make a book about his letters, because apart from an artist, he was also a very good writer and a keen observer. And there are very funny pieces in his letters, and so I think that should be an extra.
Robin, somebody said it is a lost writer.
Yeah,
because it's a natural talent, but that is also for his mathematics vision. He didn't have an education whatsoever for mathematics. But in the film, you see a drawing exposition code, and it's turning in the middle. It's moving, and there are two professors, mathematics professors, like Sir Roger Penrose. They recalculated with lots of time how he did it, and they proved it was completely correct how he did it. But Escher didn't have the skills.
And he couldn't understand what he was doing. Yeah.
So, in a way, he was kind of a natural mathematician, in the sense that musicians use math, whether they know it or not, to be able to stay on beat. So, It's a fascinating documentary, MC Escher, Journey to Infinity. Thank you so much for being on the Film Threat podcast. Congratulations on the documentary. It really is something that just as a fan of Escher's work, whether you're a student of art history or not, it's a fantastic documentary. Thank you for talking to us on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.